Would you recommend getting a MIDI controller, or you think as a complete beginner I could just kind of do without it?
Yeah, I guess like I wanted to ask you the same question about this as well. Yeah.
Great question. It is not a mandatory thing that you require. I remember when I first started producing about 12 years ago, I didn't have a MIDI controller, so I started off with the keyboard. Most professional DAWs have a keyboard option where you can like play sounds and notes off of the keyboard. And that's a good place to start. You can start off just with your keyboard, but you will come to a point where you feel limited by expressing yourself with the keyboard. So when you come to that point where you feel a limitation with expressing yourself, that's when is a good time to get a MIDI controller. Another thing I would actually recommend is trying friends' MIDI controllers before you buy a MIDI controller. So I got my first MIDI controller. It was actually a pretty cool, like long little keyboard that somebody just gave it to me that they weren't using. So I got lucky that way. And that like really changes the experience of the writing process. So yes, I recommend getting a MIDI controller, but I don't recommend like if you're not ready for one yet, don't get it yet. So just start off with the simplest basic thing that you have first. And then if you feel and then I would recommend actually trying to try other people's MIDI controllers before you buy a MIDI controller, because you'll be able to assess better what level of MIDI controller do you need.
And like as to what kind, like I mean, I'm assuming like different people might have different preferences as to what they might want to use as well. Would it like it'd be better to just try, just go around and try first, lah.
Yes, everyone's preference is different. It's not just a preference situation; it's also a budget situation, because I think like I don't recommend getting the best MIDI controller possible, like with the most amount of money you can at the beginning. I think getting a good MIDI controller, like you kind of like ascend to the need of a good MIDI controller. You start with something really simple, and then you kind of just get more complex as your workflow gets more complex. So you start to know, like, there's different types of MIDI controllers. There's like keyboard MIDI controllers. There's like just like knobs that you can twist and tweak. And then like the MIDI controller I use is basically an Ableton push. And this is a dream MIDI controller for me, because I think I spent a lot of time using keyboards with Logic. That wasn't really my instrument. The keyboard isn't really my instrument, so it's not my most comfortable thing to play. And the push allows me to do something simple, allows me to play, and it has a lot of like cool like control features. So it's able to take me off the screen and be more into the controller. But that's come gradually over time. I've like had to ascend to that need. I didn't need it in the beginning. It like came over the time after doing a lot of productions. I was like, oh wow, this thing is the thing that I want to try. I tried it. It was amazing, and then I just bought it. Actually, I bought it also because I went for a retreat, and my teacher at the retreat was using a push too, and he was before the retreat, he was actually showing us some of the stuff that he was doing on it. And then I tried it, I liked it, and then I bought it. So, yeah, this is my advice about that. Do you have a MIDI controller?
No.
I have one. I have one Novation series, but frankly speaking, I haven't used it much. Yeah, so yeah.
So that's another good observation. Like, if you are having MIDI controllers and you're not using it much, that's a sign that you shouldn't change MIDI controller yet. You should first of all figure out how to use your current MIDI controller, the tools that you already have, and then if you're not comfortable with it, then you start to look for something that is helping you realize whatever your needs are better.
So would like a electronic drum kit or like motion sensing drumsticks count? Like, I mean, they use
Absolutely.
MIDI.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's something that I think those kind of things, they probably make the process of writing drum grooves and things like that and recording it on MIDI much easier. So completely valid. Like, yeah.
But like when it comes to like accuracy of like making the beats, would you say like getting a pad or using a keyboard would be a lot more accurate? Like
As opposed to?
like a an electronic drum kit, or you could just shift it in production.
Good question. It depends on your comfort between the translation of whatever your controller is and what it gives on the computer. So, for example, I bought a plugin called MIDI Guitar, and MIDI Guitar is a plugin where I can plug in my guitar, and then it goes into like this plugin, and then whenever I play notes and stuff like that, it would come out on the screen, which is like much more comfortable for me than as opposed to playing keyboard. But the accuracy of that thing, it had a lot of accidental notes, and a lot of the accidental notes, quite a lot of them were quite nice, but quite a lot of them were not necessary. So there was only really one way for me to find out if it was useful or not, and I had to buy the plugin to find out. I don't really use the plugin anymore. I really like some of the results that I got out with it, but to be honest, I barely touch that plugin anymore. And I don't touch that plugin because I found all the expressivity I need in my current MIDI controller, the push. So it's really a question of kind of like trying the thing and then seeing how musically expressive you feel with it. The more like musically expressive and connected and excited you feel, the easier it is to work with that tool.
And like going back to like the accidental sounds being created, like in a sense, maybe it's good for like good discoveries that you wouldn't necessarily discover if you were using something else.
Absolutely. I wrote a whole album off of using that MIDI guitar plugin. It was a lot of fun to do it, but I just found it a little taxing to do the editing part because it would give so many mistakes, and then the thing would be like wrong, and then choosing what's the right wrong was like tiring in the mind, you know, like because music production is just like decision making, constantly decision making. There's lots of gold from the accidental stuff, for sure.